Doing good? Being a student athlete myself, I knew that I struggled with keeping my sleep schedule consistent. With this in mind, I wanted to conduct an experiment to determine if other student athletes, like myself, struggle with the same thing. With this in mind, I generated the question, do high school athletes get as much sleep as they should? Sleep is vital for all people, especially athletes. It allows your body and mind to recharge, ultimately allowing one to wake up refreshed and alert. It gives the body strength to remain healthy and fight off diseases. Elite athletes have been identified as having a poorer quality and quantity of sleep in comparison to the general population. This is likely caused due to training times, competition stress, muscle soreness, caffeine use, and travel. Students should get the proper amount of sleep at night to help stay focused, improve concentration, and improve academic and athletic performance. If students don't get enough sleep, they're at risk for health problems including obesity, diabetes, mental health issues, and injuries. Attaining the recommended 8 to 10 hours of sleep can be especially difficult for athletes, especially on school nights because they have to focus on their sport or activity and get their schoolwork done for the next day. This makes it much harder to get to sleep on time as well as maintain a consistent sleep schedule. It is also essential for athletes to get ample deep sleep because while in deep sleep, one's body releases growth hormones to build and repair muscles, bones, tissue, and your immune system. A study conducted by the CDC showed that 7 out of 10 high school students don't get enough sleep. This will continue to be a problem if nothing is done. Sleep deprivation is when you get less sleep than the recommended amount, especially over time. If a student athlete grows to be sleep deprived, their endurance is weakened and they may feel exhausted sooner. It may also affect learning, memory, cognition, pain perception, immunity, and inflammation. An athlete's lung function, muscle strength, and endurance may also be affected, as well as their mood, tension, confusion, fatigue, and anger. Basically, with all the effects that sleep deprivation can have on academic and athletic performance, it's extremely important for a student athlete to consistently maintain the recommended 8 hours of sleep, but it's shown that they struggle to. My overall goal for my research is to determine if high school athletes are getting less than the recommended amount of sleep, which is 8 hours, as well as help both athletes and coaches understand how much sleep they consistently get. My original hypothesis was that the high school athletes who were participating in my study would be sleep deprived. I would prove this by conducting an experiment using student athletes at one singular high school. By using students, I would obtain a variety of data to eventually help my research come to a close in a simple and accurate method. I used Dr. Michael Hauer, an associate professor in the Department of Neurology at the University of Minnesota, as a primary resource when deciding what to research and how. So you might be wondering, so what, or what's the gap? The research would not only help the participants understand their consistency of sleep, but it would also allow coaches to understand how much sleep one or more of their athletes may be getting, which ultimately ties into the research gap. The research gap for my experiment and question is that a lot of coaches, specifically high school, don't necessarily understand how much sleep their athletes might be getting. They may assume that they aren't getting enough sleep as they should, but with my research, it can help athletes and coaches understand how much sleep they are getting and how they can further understand their sleep schedules and how they can keep it consistent. In this experiment, sleep deprivation will be assumed if the participant gets less than 8 hours of sleep, as the CDC recommends that adolescents at any age between 13 and 18 should get 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night. The first thing I did was send information high school-wide via survey about my research and obtain results from those who completed it. From there, I sent out a secondary survey to those who filled out the first one and indicated that they were interested in my research. Once those results were collected, the selection process began. I selected participants based on 3 things: if they were an athlete, if they were currently training, and if they would be interested in participating in the experiment. These 3 things were essential for my experiment because I was specifically looking at high school athletes, not just high school students. I selected a variety of participants, including some who took melatonin and others who didn't. There were many different sports and ages represented, so it also wasn't just focused on one age group or one sport. There were a total of 15 participants in my experiment. Each participant was given a fitness watch made by the company Very Fit Pro, which is now discontinued. The watch tracked their total hours of light sleep, deep sleep, and total sleep. They were tasked with plugging those values into a daily survey that asked a few other questions regarding their sleep last night. Once each participant had their watch set up, the data collection began. I collected data each night except for Sundays because athletes don't typically train then, so the data wouldn't be extremely valuable. The experiment ran from February 8th of 2022 to February 21st of 2022. I was able to attain many different data points that would be extremely helpful when coming to a conclusion. I took all of the data that was submitted in the forms and put it into a Google Sheet so it's all in one place. Once all the data was collected, the analysis began. I was able to find the averages right in the Google Sheets for each participant, as well as the combined total average, which was the value that I used to prove my hypothesis. The original average of all the participants combined was 7.55 hours of sleep, which is close to 8 hours, but not quite. The highest total sleep average was 10.67 hours. However, this participant was missing quite a few data points, so the next best average was 8.56 hours. The lowest average amount of sleep was 5.79 hours. These data points show that each participant is different with how much sleep they get, but 11 out of 15 participants averaged below 8 hours of sleep. This showed that the majority of participants were getting below the recommended amount of sleep over the duration of the study. There are a pretty even amount of participants from each grade. There are 4 in grade 9, 3 in grade 10, 4 in grade 11, and 4 in grade 12. These averages could be flawed due to lack of more participants in each age group, but these numbers still mean something. There isn't really an explanation for how much sleep each age group is getting, but some factors may be workload, role on their sports team, mental health, etc. The averages between students who took melatonin and those who didn't were separated by 1.47, almost a full hour and a half. There were 6 participants who took melatonin consistently and 8 who did not. Similar to the different age groups, the averages could be flawed due to an inaccurate average. However, it could also show that those who don't take melatonin maintain their sleep schedule more effectively than those who take melatonin. Melatonin is known to have different side effects, but it varies for each person. The deep sleep values are also interesting to look at, as melatonin is known to have the role of helping an individual get better sleep and fall asleep faster. But does it really do that? Based on these results, those who don't take melatonin end up getting more deep sleep than those who take melatonin. There weren't many limitations until I got to the data collection and analysis. Once all the data was collected, I switched my view on my research and ultimately changed my research question to something more relevant to the data that I collected. When I first had the idea of research, I knew it was inevitable to have my participants forget to track their sleep for a few nights. Because of this, I extended the experiment to make sure that I had ample data to come to a conclusion. Because some of the data was missed, some of the averages may be flawed, but they are the most accurate that they can be. While I was selecting my participants, I initially had 16 total participants, but 2 dropped out for personal reasons. I was able to replace one of them, but the balance between those who took melatonin and those who didn't was no longer even. This put a wedge in my original question, but it ended up being okay with how I concluded my experiment and how I changed my question. The overall results showed that my hypothesis was correct. I originally hypothesized that high school athletes, specifically those in my study, would be consistently sleep deprived, meaning that they didn't get an average of 8 hours of sleep over the duration of my study. I am now able to show different athletic leaders at my high school my results so they can further understand how much sleep their athletes are getting versus what they originally thought. It will potentially help them set a plan for their athletes on how to get enough sleep and perform at their best academically and athletically. In the future, I would look deeper into how melatonin affects athletic performance. I would do this by selecting athletes that do not take melatonin and evaluate them both before and after they start taking it, because I would have them take it for the study purposes.
How did the choices you made when designing your research method impact your research process?
It was really crucial that I made sure to have enough participants and that those participants would be valuable with the research. So I made sure that they were interested in them, and I made sure to over-communicate with them and send out multiple surveys and make sure that they were interested and willing to do this, because if they dropped out in the middle of the research, it wouldn't have been as valuable or valuable at all. So I really made sure that they were interested and that they were going to be reliable when collecting the data.
Okay, thank you. How do your findings provide directions for future research?
I think with my findings and how my hypothesis was proved correct, I think it'd be really interesting to also look into how to help students student athletes specifically get enough sleep and help them develop schedules and just learn better skills for time management, because as you get older, it'll be harder to time manage, especially in college with having college student athletes, because that workload is much higher. So I think with my results, it'll help people understand that if high school athletes are sleep deprived, it's much more likely that college athletes are as well, and I think it'll help find what is the best way to help those athletes maintain a consistent schedule.
Okay, thank you. What was the most important research skill you developed as a result of this process, and how might you apply it to your future endeavors?
I think really looking at what the effects of sleep deprivation are, because athletes might think that they are on a consistent sleep schedule, but they may be getting under that recommended 8 hours. So I think it was important to look into what sleep deprivation can do for an athlete to help them understand how important getting 8 hours is, and you can carry that into what I was saying with college athletes as well, because again, it'll be probably harder for them to get that 8 hours of sleep with their schedules, but I think if you let them know what the potential effects may be, it'll help them adjust their sleep schedule.
Okay, thank you.